This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals?
Yes.
Well, BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional counseling done securely online.
What better time than now? I mean, I'm sure people are going through a lot of stuff through the pandemic.
Yeah, a lot of mental health awareness these days.
Yes, and BetterHelp will keep you out of the long waiting rooms. You do everything online, so you don't have to go into an office. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. You can log into your account anytime to send a message to your counselor.
And they're supposed to get back to you almost immediately.
Yeah.
A friend of mine is using it, and she said that they do. They got back to her right away.
Yeah, and they've got tons of therapists on there. You can go on and pick one out and decide, what's good for you. They've got family counseling, drug and alcohol addiction, all that kind of stuff. So anything you might be dealing with, there's people there that can help.
What else could they be dealing with?
There's probably a lot of things, but the list could get long and we got to get to the podcast. So
BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit their website and read their testimonials that are posted daily. www.betterhelp.com/reviews for that. And you can get 10% off your first month if you use our promo code MIF10, MIF10, betterhelp.com/MIF10.
And that is BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com. Go check them out.
This podcast is also sponsored by Pure Spectrum CBD.
Yeah, CBD is a big thing right now. I mean, they sell it in gas stations. You can buy it, anywhere. And it's kind of an unregulated industry.
Yeah, I had a weird experience where I got some Delta 8 gummies and it was such a trip. It was not safe.
Right. If you go to Pure Spectrum CBD, you can trust these guys. They're from Colorado. They've been doing this for a long time. Everything's tested. They come from, I think it's a family farm in Colorado. So, CBD is great. It's great for aches and pains, all kinds of stuff.
Anxiety.
Yeah. And if you get it from Pure Spectrum CBD, you're not going to fail a drug test. You're not going to get high. It is pure CBD, just the medicinal qualities, and you can trust that.
Yeah, CBD is one cannabinoid away from THC, but it's not the psychoactive cannabinoid. So it's just all the healing properties of cannabis without getting high.
That part's kind of a bummer. But for those that don't want to get high, these guys are the one to go to get all of your CBD products. You can trust them. They've been around forever. And you can save some money with our promo code
MIF10. So go to purespectrum.com/MIF10 to get 10% off all your orders.
And that's MIF, MIF 10. Stands for music is funny, but it's shorthand. So anyway, check out Pure Spectrum CBD. And now, on to the show.
What are the odds of the way history writes itself in 2040? Hypothetically, they're going, remember there was 2000, I think it was 2020, 21. There was no good music. That's why we don't play it.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raylan Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
I'm still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I'm Raylan Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raylan Nelson Band. And I still contend that we are wasting our time with these intros. It's pointless. Nobody's watching them. It's a waste of time.
We had some people reach out saying they liked them.
I think we had one person reach out. Shout out Will. But
Thanks, Will.
It's extra work for absolutely no reason. Don't.
I just...
Please don't.
It's...
For the love of God, please.
Talking to the Todd Glass.
Really?
Yeah. Talking to the Todd Glass.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado,
Todd Glass.
Todd.
Hello.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for joining us. This is my friend and guitar player, JB, and I'm Raylan. Nice
This is my friend and singer, Raylan.
JB, save it. Hold on, let me turn my volume up. How's that? Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, sounds great.
Sounds good. Can you hear us?
JB and
Yes, sir.
And
and
I'm
Raylan.
Raylan, yeah.
Cool. Good to meet you guys through the Zoom.
Yeah, man, you too. Go ahead and sing the
since
song.
yesterday, because now he's got it stuck in his head. Since yesterday when I was talking to you, I've been singing talking to the Todd Glass. And now
For Broken Glass, Annie Lennox.
the Annie Lennox song Broken Glass. Do you know that song?
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, so now he got it stuck in his head too, because we've been singing it all morning.
I know it gets stuck in your head.
Exactly.
Somebody made me a parody of it once, and I played it 100 times. Then I felt guilty for listening to a song parody about my own name, but I got over it.
That's like we were talking to Doug Stanhope. He was saying that the way you bring some people on your podcast, I think it was Henry Phillips, and you did the kind of love and marriage to Henry Phillips, and Doug has named his dog Henry Phillips. So he said 3 times a day he walks around the house singing that song to his dog.
I'm sure he does.
Well,
you know what's so funny? When you're telling Henry Phillips, I forgot that his dog is named Henry Phillips, which, by the way, it's a great name for a dog, isn't it?
Great name for a dog.
yeah.
It's like, I want to get a dog just named Henry Phillips. But then we started thinking maybe a lot of comedians' names might be like, Doug Stanhope might be a good name for your dog. No, Henry Phillips is better.
Yeah, and you put the song to it. I mean, it's kind of like the Todd Glass song. You can't get it out of your head.
Can't get it out of your head.
Hey, one other quick question. Just because it's so hot here today, I have the AC on. You're all good with hearing me and everything?
Yeah, man, it sounds fine.
And the light is bright enough?
Oh yeah, you look beautiful.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was. That's what I was.
He was just waiting for that to get started.
Yeah, like 20 minutes later, I'm like, and my hair looks okay. Anyway, well, it's good to be talking with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for doing this. Let's get into it. What kind of music fan are you, or were you? Did you start early? You casual listener? Like, what did you start off with?
Well, when I grew up, my mom actually had pretty good taste in music. I remember the albums that were around the house, and it was like the Beatles, Nielsen Schmielsen, I think Kenny Rogers, young Neil Diamond. There was a lot. There was more that I can't remember, but only 2 years ago, me and my brothers were like, Mom and Dad had, probably my mom, she listened to a lot of good music. So, but and then I listened to a little bit of everything. Like, I really did I like good music, but I also like bubblegum music sometimes, just beboppy, happy music that
Yeah.
I call it my guilty pleasure, but I'm like, well, why am I calling this my guilty pleasure? I sort of like it,
Yeah.
Right.
Me too. I get embarrassed by those songs. I almost don't want to admit that I like them, especially to my bandmates.
And it's so weird. Like when you talk your preteens and teens, it's such a, I don't know, your choice of music, you're judged harshly by your peers. It's almost like picking a team.
Now,
Yeah, right. Yeah. If you're not liking something that everybody likes. But I really didn't get, I know I sound like a broken record like this, but I feel like I like to give the other side of it, because a lot of people will, go, oh, there's no good comedy anymore. There's no good music anymore. And I learned that, first of all, what are the odds that when history writes itself, because so far people thought in the 60s, they thought the 70s suck. In the 70s, they thought the 80s suck. And it keeps happening. What are the odds the way history writes itself in 2040? Hypothetically, they're going, remember, there was 2000, I think it was 2020, 21. There was no good music. That's why we don't play it. It's just people don't know where to find it. And as you get older, you have to know what's going on out there. I think you really got to be out there. You can't just watch TV and decide what the state of the music is. So now I'm in the music more than I ever was, even in the past.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that maybe has to do with age. Like I said, what you grow up with, the soundtrack of your youth, there's songs that are just soundtracks for a night that you can remember. And every time you hear that, you're like, oh, that. So I think some people just, they're fine with whatever they've heard up to this point. I go to Aerosmith and back, and then I'm fine. I don't care about anything else. But
you know what? I'd be all right with that if they would just shut up. Like, the right answer, if you ask a 50-year-old, is there good music today? It's okay they like the music they grew up with. They should. It has a special meaning in their heart. And it certainly was good music. But if somebody asks, you know, hey, what do you think of the music today? What's so hard for a 45 or 50-year-old person to go, you know what? I don't really know what's going on, so I'll tap out, because I would just give an uneducated, you know, most people. So anyway, I like to, you know, my friends know what I like, so they put newer music in front of me that they go, oh, Todd will like this, you know.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was going to ask where do you find your music these days? So friends of yours pass it along.
You know, I have the podcast, and a lot of the you know, the guys are on the podcast that work there or intern, whatever you want to call it, they're younger. So, you know, they do go, like, you know, they'll go to see a new band, but then they'll go 2 hours early to see the 4 bands that open up for them. That's how you know what music is, because you're out there submersed in the scene, you know. And I listen to them, and they'll put some stuff in front of me, and I don't love all of it, but that's not my point. But I like a lot of it. Like, they'll put stuff in front of me, and I'll be like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I think a lot of it is when people go, there won't be good music like there used to be. Even if you played them a song from that band that they never heard, but now they're 42 or 51 or whatever age, you're not going to like it as much as when you were 19 with all your dreams ahead of you and no responsibilities. So what's so hard? Like, and you know what? I know I go off all the time. Even when I hear someone go, someone showed a clip the other day, and it was really great. It was just a crowd having a good time. And somebody had to go online and go, see, no one would be doing that today. They'd all have their cameras. And I get angry. I go, you know what? They have their cameras, and they're having a good fucking time, too. I got news for you. You think it was, they're having a great time. And you know what? I've been to a few shows, and I pulled my camera out. Out of the 2-hour show, I probably had my camera out 4 or 5 times max for about a minute. Yeah, but there's 2,000 people, so you always see phones, but not everyone's out there for the 2. So I don't even mind the phones. What's so wrong to have a memory of it? You know, they're having a great time. You know, you're the one getting older and dying.
The flip side of that is, because I'm older too, and we didn't have that when I was coming up. But if we did, I would have been there with a phone. Like, half the reason there wasn't any of that, because it didn't exist. But people nobody was any better than anybody. Yeah, nobody was any better. They just didn't have access to fucking cell phones, and if they did, they'd be on it.
Right. And of course, we all know there's a time. My point isn't that everybody can have better cell phone etiquette. Me, everybody, I don't mind them. You remind each other, hey, let's put our phones away. That's not what I'm talking about. Of course, there's a time to put your phone away and be present, whether it's a book or whether it's cell phone, of course. But a lot of times, you know, so, I mean, I like that I had some phone footage that a month later I could watch, you know, when I went to see somebody. So anyway, blah, blah, blah.
And then every single time I decide I'm going to put my phone down and be like, I'm not going to use my phone. I'll walk into a store or something. I always wish I had my phone, because something funny's in there and I need to take a screenshot and send it to JB or a friend of mine or whatever, you know? So we have to have our phones with us. We have to.
Well, that's why at my house, I don't call it a no cell phone night, because exactly what you just said. Sometimes you're hanging out. What I don't want to do, and me too, like, I don't want to see just someone scrolling Twitter, Instagram, email, Twitter, Instagram, email. But a lot of times you want to take a picture of the night, or somebody said something, you wanted to make a quick voice memo. So really what I want is people to be more present. And sometimes if you have your phone with you, but you utilize it right, it does make you more present, because instead of looking for a piece of paper and then taking time to write it down, you can just pick your phone up and go, blah, 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 boom, done. Or take a picture, or look something up. Somebody goes, wait, is that musician still touring? And then you look it up, and that leads to conversation. Well, that's like taking out the encyclopedia 30 years ago, only it's a lot easier. So the phone isn't, the bastard that, it's like a knife, you can cut people with it, or you can operate people. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into some comedy, because that's the stuff we're always interested in. We talk about music all the time.
Yesterday you told me, tell us about you bringing a keyboard player with you, right? You said you bring a keyboard with you.
Yeah. When I was younger, like, it seemed like a lot of comedians did have a band. I don't know if it was their own band, but they would open. They would not a musical opening act, but they themselves would have music, and I always liked it. So it just casually grew. But I would have I'd bring a keyboard player, but then I would use a local drummer, maybe a trumpet if I can get trumpet or guitar, whatever. But I bring one person with me, and sometimes even them playing as they're being seated, they don't always play while they're seated, but if I feel the club needs it, and just the fact that they come into a club and there's live music just as they're being seated, and it adds like an element of excitement to the night. And then when the lights go down and they start playing that, ladies and gentlemen, 2 minutes to showtime, and then it goes dark and the band plays like a first upbeat song that takes over the room, and then it goes black, and and then they introduce the first act, and when the show's over, the band plays louder music. While they're being sad, I play instrumental stuff. I want them to be able to talk while they're being seated. I want it in the background music. I don't want them to feel like they have to applaud after every song. I say, guys, no breaks. One song medleys into the other. No, I don't want them to feel. But after the show, even as they're walking out, they play like upbeat music, instrumental, and it's like it makes the whole night an event. So I really like it. It's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it.
It's a big time throw way back, because it reminds me of like before there were comedy clubs or anything, there would be the band, the comedian that's warming up for the stripper, and it would be music, comedy, burlesque, and then music. It's kind of along the same lines. You're adding that whole music and not just a stand-up comedy show. Those things were shows way back then. Yeah,
just to add to it. And it's not because I think comedy's in a bad place, because I think comedy is comedy's in the best place ever. It always is like that. In the current, people don't think it is, but the best day in comedy is tomorrow,
Yeah.
The best day in comedy is tomorrow. Things you can say now that you could never say before. You can talk about anything you want to talk about. I know you're probably, I shouldn't say this, but maybe thinking, yeah, but there's a lot of comedians that say you can't say anything anymore. I know, and I disagree. And so, that's okay. I'm having a ball joining in the 21st century and saying things, doing things that you could never do 30 years ago in comedy, and so it's great.
And I really don't hear a lot of the comedians that actually do say things that could be considered offensive. They're not the ones saying that they can't say it. I think you can say whatever you want. You just have to be able to take the heat. And if you're good with that, and it doesn't make, that's kind of the deal. I don't really hear.
Oh yeah, sometimes what they're really saying is, I want to say whatever I want, but I don't want people to be able to react.
Yeah.
Now, I don't always agree with the outcry, but sometimes it's not wrong. And it's just, sometimes, I don't mind growing. I'm not mad at growth. When people go, you couldn't do that. One time they asked Norman Lear, the creator of All in the Family, and man, I wanted to hug him for his answer he gave. He goes, you couldn't do another All in the Family today, the interviewer said. And he went, good. And I love that answer, because what it meant, good, it did its job. Yeah. Now we're dealing with different issues. What we don't need to do it anymore. So yeah, things change, comedy goes on, and I think it's at a fun place. I like it. It's represented by more groups than ever before. It used to be basically white males, Now now you go look at the scene, and it needs to be more diverse, but it is more diverse than it's ever been in the history of comedy. And I've been doing this a long time. And when you have a diverse, when you're a club and you book diverse acts, comedy acts, it's not a mercy mission that you're booking more women, more everything, more people. It's not a mercy mission for those people. It makes the audiences better. Because when you book a diverse show, always, you get a diverse audience. And you don't want that as a club owner? I would, because I think it makes a more intelligent audience.
That makes sense. Now, like you said, you've been doing this for a very long time. I've been playing music for a bunch of years too. It'd be interesting to see because where you started and what the industry was and what you had to do. It's completely changed on, I'm sure, day-to-day level, what your goals are, what the path is, all that. So when you started, you started young, right?
I started at 16. And a lot of comedians start very young. I found out over the years. I started at 16, and long story very short, I went down to a comedy club in Center City, Philly. I didn't even really know, because it's like music a lot too, I'm sure. If bands weren't, or if comedians weren't a household name, I didn't know there were those in between, like, oh, they're still drawing 300 people. They're not a household name, but my parents don't know who they are. But so I went down to the Comedy Works. I really didn't know. I thought it was going to be college kids telling jokes, And then now they weren't as famous then, but we would see like Richard Lewis, Paul Reiser, young Eddie Murphy, Gilbert Gottfried, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, Gary Shandling. And we would just see these week after week, these unbelievable acts. And then they always said, if you think you're funny, come on Wednesday night and try out your hand on an open mic night. And long story short, I eventually did it. And I found my world. I had made friends, and I felt like, now this is what I didn't think, if I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. You don't even think that way, but I knew I fucking loved it, I really enjoyed it.
So you get that feeling. What are you thinking? Like, how long till you decided this is what I'm going to do? I know it's like joining a new band. You're like, I want to do this forever. But like, what was the next step after that? Because you can't, this is pre-internet or YouTube and stuff. You can't just promote yourself. There's certain channels you have to get into to even get out there at all. How was that process as a youngster?
It was just different, but you just did as many, as you started to get booked. Like at first you just stay in the city you're in.
Right.
And then sometimes you're not ready to move to New York or LA yet, but you want to move to a city where there's a bigger scene going on. Again, I'm sure there's crossover in music across, board here.
Completely.
So you move to, Chicago's got a great scene. It's not LA or New York yet, but so I stayed in Philly and I did as many shows as I could. I mean, I would perform a lot. I was 16 and 17 and I would just, do college shows, or then I would go do there were a lot of comedy clubs at that period, and you could make a lot of money just staying in Philly. And then eventually you got to go to New York or LA. So I went to LA about when I was 16, I started 17, 18, 19, 20. I moved to LA when I was about 23. And
why there before?
Also,
why LA and not New York?
That's a good question. I knew some people in LA, so I felt comfortable to go there, like people that were going to help me along the way, like other comedians and friends that I had made from them coming into Philadelphia. So I thought, and I always sort of, my uncle lived here. And so I was like, I don't know, I like the weather and I like the idea. And I do really love LA. I'm really glad that I'm here. But also, I lived in a place called Valley Forge, Pennsylvania when I started comedy. And there was a 3,000 seat in the round place called the Valley Forge Music Fair. And it was amazing. And I ushered there for a little while. And then I started opening up for acts there. The owner would always go, hey, are you ready to open up for acts at the music fair? And I would always, see him at Denny's. I was friends with his kid and he was one of the owners. And I was like, oh, not yet. Because I knew I wasn't. At that point, I was like 19. And then George Jones was coming into town and he didn't have an opening act. And they called the Comedy Works and the owner, said, well, Todd Glass, yeah, he could do it. And I was so nervous, in front of 3,000 people, George Jones. And then I found out that his nickname, they said, you do 12 minutes. I was like, oh, cool. I barely had it, I thought, clean,
Sure.
And the day before he called me, he goes, hey, by the way, he casually said it. He didn't know it was making me nervous. He goes, you could probably do 15 to 20. We'll figure out a way to let you know. And then I found out his nickname was No Show George. I was like, are you fucking shitting me? So I went and I knew 2 minutes in it was going to go okay. It was like, I kept forgetting where the audience was because the stage would turn and I would go, oh, like that woman over there. And she goes, I'm over here. I'm like, oh, you're over here. And
crowd working
I saw
around
him
is
in
tough.
the corridor, in the area when I was done, he was standing there, super friendly, and he goes, how's the crowd? And I remember telling all my friends, what does he give a shit how the crowd is? And then I learned years later, you always ask how the crowd is,
just to know what you're
and
stepping
I did
into.
George Benson and Patti LaBelle and just a ton of Luther Vandross. I opened up for a lot of music acts for a long time.
Did you have any bad experiences with that? Like we've talked to some other comedians who've opened for, like metal bands and such. The crowd can be a little less receptive to a comedian coming out. Do you have to face any of that? The acts you've just mentioned are a little more mellow than, Metallica.
Exactly. That there were no bad experiences with that. Some shows didn't go as good as I wanted them, but only once bad. I mean, I just couldn't get my grip. They were literally yelling out, and I hate that I forget their name, but they do that song, My Sharona.
The Knack.
the knack. And this was like in 92, I think. It did not go well. I mean, they were literally yelling at me. And I was like, at that point, you know, what are you going to do? I just did a short period of time, and I just got off stage and got in my car and cried.
So at your comedy shows, how do you deal with hecklers? What is your strategy?
You know, it's changed over the years. Two things. One, I'm at the point where I work clubs that they have a high standard of how they deal with hecklers and talkers. You know, you either have an A room, a B room, or a C room. And the worse the room, the worse. You know, they all, if someone does something egregious, but the better the club, the stricter they are. So I go into it with that. But, you know, I don't want to mess with them where they're liking it. You know, I don't want to go like, hey, what's your name? Why don't you, and then get big laughs. I don't want it. I want them to shut up. I used to say, if I'm making fun of a heckler or telling him to shut up and they're having a good time, that's not what I want. I want them to be scared and sorry they ever got into anything. And so the way I deal with it is, number one, I make my own pre-show announcement at every club. The lights come down, voice of God, I'm in the back. I go, hey, everybody, welcome. We're glad you're here. But I'm strict but loving. I go, we're going to rip through some announcements. We're doing that out of respect to you, not disrespect. We want this to go really well. And then I go over, like, here's why you don't talk. It's loving but stern. And then I always say, hey, by the way, here, whatever club, they have a 0 tolerance for heckling. At some clubs, they have a warning system. We should let you know that here at the Funny Bone, they have a 0 tolerance for heckling. Unfortunately, if you heckle once, they have to ask you to leave. They only do it that way because that's the way the customers have wanted it since 1980 when they opened their door. I stole that line from them because I love it. This is it. Our customers don't want you to fucking talk. So I make that whole announcement. And then this was drastic change after I started bringing an act with me. This is how I deal with it. I know it's a long answer, but it's over the years. Then I stopped bringing acts or getting acts that talk to the crowd. Because if I do all that, the last thing I say is, other than that, we're glad you're here. We started late. We're going to go late. And we're really glad you're here. And it's showtime. Because I don't want them to feel like they're being yelled at. But I don't bring an act that talks to the crowd. Not only talks to the crowd, because this is monumental if you really don't want the crowd to heckle. Or it's not really heckling anymore. It's mostly loud talking at their tables. We call it heckling. Most problems at clubs come from people that are too loud at their tables. So I have the opening act, not only not talk to the crowd, like, where are you from, what do you do, but what do they call questions you know the answers to, rhetorical questions. Like, they have a joke about the mall, they could just do the joke, but they go, has anyone been to the new mall? Any sports fans here? Anyone ever have a birthday for their dog? 0. Whoever opens for me does 10 minutes and no questions, nothing, because that doesn't wake up idiots. So doing that, by the time I hit the stage, you showed them how it works. Because if you make all those announcements and then the opening act comes out and starts talking to the crowd, then everything you said just gets ruined. So that's the way I deal with it. And I tell the doorman at every club I go to, everybody's different. So I go, hey guys, I have a 0 tolerance. If anybody talks, just boom, they're out. So that's the way I deal with it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's get back to LA. When you got there, were you doing the road a bunch before you got there and just moved there to boost your career to another level? Or did you hit there and sort of establish yourself and then hit the road a little bit after you landed in Los Angeles?
Yeah, you know, in Philly, all I did was local shows, and then maybe Baltimore I went to once. So I didn't really work the road ever. But then when I got to LA, there was like 13 improvs, and if you worked the main improv, there was a booker, and you'd get booked in San Francisco, and you'd get booked in Dallas, and you'd get booked in Houston, and then a ton of one-nighters, like an hour away from LA. So I didn't really, until I got to LA, I didn't really do, bar shows and, and all that stuff. I'm glad I did it. It makes you a good comedian.
Who'd you come up with this? Was there anybody, particular comedians you hung around with when you got there?
When I moved to LA, so many that I can't, this might be an easier point in my career that I remember who,
right.
I had a lot of friends because they, I knew them when they were in Philly, and then I worked at that club. So you end up taking them to the mall. But in around 94, there was like 30 clubs in every city. When they say comedy fell apart, it didn't fall apart. They didn't need 30 clubs in every city or 8 clubs or 6 or whatever. And in LA, what they called the alternative comedians. It was really alternative venues in '94 where they could create whatever they wanted. They didn't have to deal with shitty clubs that were more into the food than they were. Not good comedy clubs. Good comedy clubs, the show comes first. But a bad comedy club, it became just a thing to serve food and get people in there and, hey, who's got a birthday? And you couldn't really do anything creative. So in '94, they were doing comedy in alternative spaces where you could control the atmosphere. No TV. Who cares if it was a lobby? And it was during the day, and they brought in the PA and they made shows. And that's when I felt I became a better comedian, because stand-up comedians and like sketch people merged together. And there were these unbelievable shows. There were some people that traditionally did sketch, did stand-up, or there was a sketch and then stand-up. But it was everybody. It was like, Jack Black would be there and performing with Tenacious D with Kyle and Dave Cross and Sarah Silverman and Bob Odenkirk and Patton Oswalt and Paul F. Tompkins and Kathy Griffin and just the list goes on and on. And it was a great time for me to grow as a comedian, because these audiences that they cultivated, they were patient and they were great. And that was a lot of fun.
And that whole crowd probably encouraged creativity. When you're looking around at all the different things, you're like, well, I can't just go up there and, I need to bring a little something extra because it's getting crazy.
Exactly. I used to say that by that point in my career, I wasn't nervous I used to get nervous the crowd would like me. And then I started to hope I liked the crowd. I'm like, I know I can do this. But they were so good, the crowds, it made me want to be a better comedian, because they were just so, my brother goes, what makes them a good crowd once? And I was like, patience. And, just being patient, if that joke didn't work, or it doesn't, just being right there, nurturing,
So we got to talk a little bit about Last Comic Standing. We've talked with people that have been on there. Kathleen Madigan, we talked to her a bunch. She was on with you, which we both watched that back in the day. Your season 2 is the best lineup they ever had. But I'm always curious to talk to people about that, because we sort of originally talked about it being kind of like The Voice or American Idol or stuff like that. But I think it was Kathleen, and I was like, but it seemed more legit. Now, you guys might have thought it was jive, but for us on the outside, we were seeing all these comedians, and I'm like, it just seems like it was better talent. And she made a point of, you can have done nothing and have a good voice, and they're going to give you songs and whatever. But if you get a comic that's done nothing and put them on there after the first 5 minutes of whatever they do, they're not going to be any good for the series. You had to have legitimate comics to come on to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's what they were trying to do. Give people that, because I'd never been on primetime TV. You do late night shows, and I'd done a lot of TV by that point, but it's either, shows that are on late night. So this was primetime, so you did get to a bigger audience. So I think they were trying to give people a platform that were able to back it up, because also when the show's over and you want to go on tour, if you only have 8 minutes, but I thought there was a little bit of both. There was sometimes, okay, but that person, maybe they just put on the road with 3 other people. They figured it out. Like, these people got managers, but there were a lot of people that did have, I went on the road afterwards, and it was the only thing in my career that sort of felt like it happened overnight. Like, everybody talked about it, but like when you were done the house, even though I got bumped out early, I was second one out of the house, but then they brought some of us back. On the road, it was crazy. It was crazy. It was like, it was crowded and things really, got better. They got better. And the house itself, you don't want to get knocked out of the house, so you are a little nervous, but I had a really good time. Back then they were really trying to drive this, what I call reality. They wanted to make it like MTV, where everybody lived in the house and who ate my cookies, I call it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel they missed a lot of great moments because they were so trying to create conflict. Like, we would sit out by the fire pit every night, me and I don't want to listen to, because you forget a lot of names, me, Gary Goldman, John Heffron, Alonzo Bowden, Corey Holcomb, and we would talk about comedy. We'd talk about, who do you like better, Letterman, Leno. What do you think, should there be any rules in comedy, or all these questions. They didn't use any of it.
I was
but
just
it
thinking.
Just ended up on the editing room floor, but I thought, somewhere in there's some great conversations we all had, but I had a really good time. I mean, we just hung out and did bits, and it's like you camp for adults, you know. It was a lot of fun.
Well, you mentioning that, I just made me think that they missed out on probably the greatest podcast series ever if they would have just let you guys talk about comedy behind the scenes while you're in the house. Can you imagine if they don't focus on that?
I always said that footage is there somewhere, and if you had the money, like, you know, let's say I had the money of whatever, you know, so somebody doing a stand-up that has so much money, you could probably get that footage. And it really is, because people, it's like sports. People love to hear, that care about sports, hear people, especially that they respect, talk about sports, hear the difference of opinion. Now that's interesting too. And we did so much of that. And, but nevertheless, it was a lot of fun being in the house. You know, you're with, overwhelmingly, you know, comedians get along and you just do bits all the time. And it was fun.
And I assume you got a bigger kick in your career from that than any of the late night talk shows you'd done up to that point as far as selling tickets.
Yeah, that was like, to this day, because you know what happens? It kickstarts things. Like, before, if they were watching late night television or they saw an ad for it or they saw your picture somewhere, that would mean nothing to them. But even if it's 3 years later or 5 years later or 10 years later, but right away, right afterwards, like, 6 months after the show, if I was on a show late at night, they would now know me because of that show, so they would stop and watch it. So not only did you gain the audience that watched you on that show, but it continued like the domino effect to this day. To this day, it's helped me.
Yeah, I saw you here in Nashville, I guess the year after, the first time you came through after that show. What do you think of Zanies?
You know, it's been a long time, but that's where, that week that I was there, Mitch Hedberg was doing Sunday night. I did the whole week.
I saw him that Sunday night too. I caught back to back there.
And it was, I'd known Mitch, of course I knew Mitch and I enjoyed his comedy, but I stayed till Monday because I wanted to see Mitch on Sunday night. And I went in and, watched the show, and that's what made me want to be a better comedian, because there's no doubt about it that since that whole crowd was there to see him, sometimes the crowd's there to see you, 100% of the people are there to see you. But sometimes some of them are there to see you, others are just coming because it's a comedy club. Hey, we hope we like the show. Right. But with Mitch, he was already at the point where they were all there to see him. And it was a completely different audience than I had dealt with for 3 days. And I thought, that's what happens. Not only when you do good comedy, but when you do comedy where you're not punching down. You get a kinder audience. And kind meaning that they were quiet when he would tell his joke, and then he was going to the next joke. I mean, they were erupting with laughter. They weren't a snooty audience. That's not what I'm talking about. But you could look around that room and see 300 people just laughing and then being quiet, totally soaking in the show, totally immersed in the show. And I thought, that's what you get when not only you do good comedy, but you do good comedy. If you go back and look at Mitch's work, it's not embarrassing. He doesn't have to go, oh, that joke is so mean for no reason, or that. And it really made me want to be a better comedian that night. I'm really glad I took that in.
Hey guys, take a moment and check out this trailer for a brand new podcast from our friends Brian Callen and Thomas McCormick.
Do you like making money, betting on fights? Is it your favorite thing to do every Saturday night? Do you like some handsome fellas breaking down the odds?
And you developed quite the swimmer's body, because I've seen your parents. They're both a couple. No.
If you have Chinese stars, you know martial arts.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Roughhouse Friday!
At the end of the day, if you like betting on combat sports, there's one place to be on Fridays. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, you're right. You can find Roughhouse Friday on all the podcast apps, on Apple and Spotify, Google Play, wherever the hell you listen to it, YouTube, wherever.
Our goal is to give you, if you like to bet on combat sports, our goal is to talk to a wide range of experts and give you the best odds. You bet on combat sports. I don't, but I want to start doing it. But I want to do it from an educated perspective, and that's what we're going to do. So
I think it's going to help me. It's going to help my betting habit, for sure. Talking to all these experts, and we're going to talk to fighters, comedians, actual betting experts. We're talking to everybody that knows something about it, and we're going to learn a shit ton, along with everybody else.
And my feeling is, I'm really curious to see if we can get broad perspective. When you get a broad perspective, it's called the wisdom of crowds. But the crowds are going to be experts in the field. Let's see what happens. We can bring the odds down. And my goal is to make people money.
Now back to the show.
So did you notice the shift? After that, you've been on TV a bunch. When the internet age came in, and I just kind of remember, like, if I wanted to see comedians, it was Comedy Central or HBO. That's where I caught everything. And you could only get who got through the channels that they would present to you, you know?
Right.
So at some point that changed. I'm sure with comedy, it did with music. You know, the system kind of breaks down and now everybody can get out there. But if you're like me and we're doing it the old school way, now you're presented with, oh shit, now I have to promote myself. I have to do this. I have to do that. And it's a whole nother game. Did you run into that?
Yeah. And, you know, look, whenever I never feel like I want to feel like I'm getting up on a soapbox, because my goal really is to inspire. Forget about comedians I'm not fond of. I have a lot of comedians I'm fond of. I like them. They're funny. But at a relatively young age, I remember guys at 38 going, oh, now I got to do this. Now I got to do that. And it's like, I try to motivate them to go, yeah. It's like, things change.
Yes.
Things change. And, you know, I think what it's like, they're saying, I already got good at this. Now I have to change. So whatever vehicle comes along, it's not that it wasn't right for them. Like when Vine came along, a lot of people be like, oh, Vine, how are you going to be funny in 15 seconds? Instagram came along and they went, oh, Instagram, I got to do Instagram now. And then podcasts came along and every comedian, not every, but a lot of comedians made fun of podcasts. And they go, everyone's doing a podcast. I go, so why don't you stop doing stand-up? A lot more people do stand-up, and you thought, oh, I know, because you want to think you could do it a little different. So when those things came along, it doesn't mean you have to love every one of them. Someone might not be for you. You know, Vine wasn't for me, but I loved Instagram, or Vine and Instagram weren't for me. But man, I love the podcast or TikTok or whatever it is. And a lot of people, they go right to, oh, this is what you got to do. And I think the easier way to snap someone out of it is to go, what's your alternative? What's your point? Because it's not going to go back. It's not going to change. It's not going to change. You either want it to be. And one more quick thing. When people say it's not right for them, it means it's work and it's different and you have to learn something. Because any of those things I just pointed out, it's a little weird hypothetical, but I think you'll get what I'm saying. If you went to even a musician or a comedian, whatever it is, TikTok, let's go to... let's use TikTok even. That's the most current. And somebody came to you and you're 45 years old or 50 and your manager came to you, he goes, hey, HBO wants to do these little interstitials. They're like TikTok. They're going to be about 60 seconds long. You'll get paid $150,000 for the year and you'll have 2 editors and 2 other comedians you can pick. And you'll do these little things. Watch TikTok tonight, learn about it. You said, you could have a ball doing that. You could be, I have ideas like that. Or Vine, if somebody said, you'll make $100,000, you have to do these 10 seconds, they're little interstitials, they're 10 seconds, 15, if you had a crew of people. So it's not that they couldn't, when these vehicles come along, they're not right for anybody. It's just that you have to do shit, you have to work, and it's new, and it's like when you get your new cell phone, it's a pain in the ass, but it's that or die, It's true. You got to pivot. It's I was speaking more of the fact that like everything you've learned has just changed. And it's almost, instead of like, I don't want to do this shit, it's like, what do I do? How do I do this? And if I think anybody that's older, that's been doing it since the late 80s up to now, has had to go through that and go, well, how much do I want to either do comedy or play music or whatever you do? You make that choice like, well, this is how it's done now. Do you want to do it or do you not want to do it? Because to your point, it's not going back. So you can sit around and bitch and moan about it. And it's fun to, it's fun to get the old man and sit around with your buddies and go, rah, rah, rah. But as far as a philosophy and the way to live your life, you have to just accept, well, this is the new game. And do I want to play or am I just going to?
And something else is coming. And
some people don't want to play, but yeah, something else. Hopefully live long enough and be playing music long enough to go, oh, great. Here comes another thing. I had no idea about that.
Yeah. And I see guys that are even older than me that have embraced it. And because of it, by the way, you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to change if what makes you mad, what makes you tick, what makes you laugh. You just have to present it in different ways. And you have to learn how that app works and get comfortable with it. But you don't change. It's not like you have to go, oh, great, now I have to reinvent what I think good music is, or now I have to reinvent what I think good comedy is. No, there's just different vehicles that help you take it to the audience. And, that's all you have to do. So I embraced it. And look, one thing I probably did, I remember when I started comedy, there were the older comedians from the 70s. And I remember, I know he's dead, but you know what? It's okay. I'm not hurting him. Steve Allen, all he did was say, oh, comedy today sucks. Comedy today sucks. Comedy today, comedy today, comedy today. And I thought, I don't want to turn into that. And I didn't. So, because I didn't like it then. I didn't like being a 19-year-old comedian and having older guys, comedy's not what it used to be. It's like, everybody thinks it's not what it used to be, and it's just not the way it is. It's delusional, and it's, to be honest, quite frankly, it's very sad. It's very sad, because it's, especially the comedians that I like, and I think they're funny, and I think they have something to offer, and they're just gonna, now I gotta do this, now I gotta do that. Yeah, what do you want?
Yeah. And I want to hear the new jokes. So even as much as we all love the old guys, I don't go back and listen to them ever. I listen to comedy podcasts and I want to hear your new, all y'all's new stuff and the people who are out there now and doing it. And I think it's a great time for comedy.
Yeah. And we always talk about the irony of how we get to write 10 songs or whatever, and we can play those forever. And some people might not even want to hear the next 10 or whatever. They want you to do the original 10. You guys do a special and everybody's seen it and maybe a few jokes, but you're expected to have new material as soon as you go out. You don't even really get to tour your special once it comes out.
It's like the opposite. You tour it beforehand, kind of, to work the material.
I will tell you, you're spot on with a slice of comedians. But there are a lot of comedians that change the adage. In other words, I'm not the only one. You don't have to do what happened where there were a few comedians doing that. Every year they do a new act. And I want to make this really clear. If that's what they love, then that's what they should do. We don't all have to do the same thing. So if you like doing a new year, and you said it perfectly, it almost did it backwards. You toured getting it right, then you do the special. But the audience, and I sat in the audience, even though I was young, but I remember what it was like to see a comedian a year later. And I'd go to school the next day. Hey, we saw Paul Reiser. We saw Richard Lewis. The audience doesn't mind if you do some of the old stuff. That's a comedian's choice. But if you go back to a club a year later and you have 50% new material, you're never going to please everybody, but overwhelmingly, they're going to love it. They're going to go, oh yeah, they had a shit ton of new material and they did some of the old stuff. So I enjoy touring, not starting all over. I don't enjoy it that way. For me, it's a slow, I drop that, I pick up that, I drop that, I pick up that. And I enjoy it that way. And there are other comedians that do it that way too. So you don't matter of fact, if you enjoy doing a whole new hour every year, then you should do it. But if you're doing it because you think the audience likes it, I think I might be right. I think if audiences had a choice, they wouldn't mind if it was 50, 60% new and 40% old. They're going to go home and go, oh, it was great, So that's the way I do it because I enjoy it. And I liked when I went and saw a comedian a year later and he did some of the old bits that I really liked. I thought, great, a big chunk of new stuff and a big chunk of old stuff.
Well, and then also you guys work it out a little bit differently. The story gets, you tell it a little differently 6 months later, or you add something else in. And so, yeah, I agree.
And to your point, back before the internet was so prevalent, when we would bring people back, say, to see you the second time, we bring our friends back. Like, I hope he does these bits because they were fucking funny. And I hope that's in this tour as well, before. Yeah. And I don't know, but it seems like there'd be very few comedians that could turn over a really good hour every year. I know bands can't do that. You can't come up with a great album every year.
Yeah, quality of your jokes.
You can, and without naming exactly, and without naming names, not that it's a bad thing, but a few of my comedian friends even realize that. They go, I'm not enjoying the road. Like, no one's saying you shouldn't come out with new material. Of course, you got to keep a fresh flow. But it didn't have to be to the magnitude of writing a new material every year. And a lot of them I know changed that style. Or they didn't put out a special. You know, I think, look, for everybody, they do what they want. I'm very clear with that. Like, this, what my theory here does not have to be right for everybody. But I bet if you do a special every 3 years, that's probably going to be you at your best. Every 3 years, that's still a lot of pressure, but you can enjoy your life on the road, you know?
Mm-hmm. And is the special, I guess it's still, I mean, for someone that's established like you, I know you're probably, do you use that hour as a landmark anymore or think about specials, or you just go out and do comedy and then maybe at some point go, I got enough for a new special, maybe I'll go shoot one? Or do you even think about new specials anymore? Because you've been, like you said, you've been doing it a long time and you don't have to do a special ever again and people are still going to come see you.
Oh, well, I don't know if I could even do one every year if I wanted. I don't know if, I would be able to, but for me, about every 3 years is what happens. And, but even if I could choose, like if the bigger you are, the more, the bigger you are, no offense to myself, but there's different levels of stand-up. If you're John Mulaney, you could do a special every year but for me, I couldn't even if I wanted to, but I know what I really enjoy. It seems like about every 3-4 years, going back. So to answer to your question, I know like right now it's been 3 years since my last special almost, or maybe 2.5, and I got to start thinking about it. So I'm out on the road and I'm okay. I got to do that. I got to get that bit polished. So, but I still have my staples throughout that. And if for some reason a new joke isn't working, I'll go to a staple. Like I want the show to go well. If people are paying good money.
Well, and then also you have to live life a little bit to get some content for your art, right? So every year you really got to be on the road doing stuff or something because things got to be happening.
How many jokes can you make about your kitchen?
Yeah, exactly.
My dream would be to have a big, I've said this always, but it'll happen, is to just, and I'm talking a tour bus where you have, a driver and you drive all night. And I'm talking, not my own RV, but like a tour bus.
Yeah.
And to go live on it and just basically tour. And I've done it opening up for acts. And I did something with Daniel Tosh about 4 years ago. We did like 30 shows in 32 days. And everyone said to Daniel and me too, like, about 20 days in, you're going to get, we didn't. Because if I go to bed at night and hypothetically my hotel room starts up and drives for 10 hours while I sleep, I don't give a shit. So it was pure bliss for us. Like we both agree. We're like 27 days in. We loved it. I love that life. But for the way I draw, it doesn't merit me because I go to a city and do 4 or 5 days at one club because for me to get my amount of people out, I have to do like Thursday, 250 people, Friday 2 shows, Saturday 2 shows, Sunday to get everybody. But if you're a huge draw, you shoot into Philly, you do 1 show in front of 3,000 people and tour bus takes off to your next city, But so my style of what I draw doesn't warrant a tour bus, but I do love it. And I know your grandfather, I believe me, I'm so aware that I'm like, I could do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
It's like a time machine because to your point, you fall asleep and that long drive disappears and you wake up and you're like, wow, I'm in another city and I know nothing of it. It's fantastic.
Where you wake up, what I found us doing, if you woke up and you still had another 2 hours to go, we'd just have coffee and watch the sunset. My favorite thing to do is to wake up before everybody else. And keep in mind, I'm only on the tour bus with usually 2 people. So it's not like, I get it. If you're in a band and there's 13 people on the tour bus, that could get that's a different story. I respect that. But with us, it's like 2-3 people. I'd get up, I'd go to the front all by myself, get my coffee or tea and just look at the countryside, it's really pretty cool. Pretty great life.
Sit up and hang out with the driver is always fun too, the early morning when the sun's coming up.
Yeah, that's why you always like we only had one driver once and he wasn't that nice, but the last driver, he was super nice, but he did tell us this, which made us laugh because we figure other people might do it. He goes, "Hey, I always enjoy the company," but he sort of said it in a polite way. Just no yawning or coming up here and talking about you can't sleep. He goes, because you don't want me driving you through the night and having you come up. And we were like, oh my God, people must do that. They come up and they're like, oh, I'm so sleepy. You know, meanwhile, this guy's like got 12 hours to go, you know.
Bouncing trucker speed off the windshield, trying to stay awake. And you're like, just can't get to sleep.
So when was the first time you remember hearing about my grandpa? What's your own Willie Nelson experience story? Or do you have...
We've decided that there's a lot of people that say they've smoked pot with your grandfather that happened. We go, there's no way they did it. But
we hear those stories
when I moved to LA, I mean, it's really, I mean, as you know, you can't really not know about Willie Nelson. I mean, you know, it's like, even if somebody says they hate country music, you still go, well, what about Willie Nelson? Oh, I love Willie Nelson, you know? Yeah. And then I just remember hearing about the tour bus, and very many years ago, you know, and I was like, that became like, I was so jealous of that. I go, I would love to do that. That would be, you know, that would be my dream come true, to be able to be on a bus, have everything where you want it, you know where it's at. And so yeah, that was you know, and now I'm at the point where I go, you know, you better go see Willie Nelson, you know, because I don't want to miss. I missed the opportunity to see George Carlin live, and I was like, shit, we should have gone and seen him at the Comedy Magic Club, you know.
Yeah, my grandpa actually. It's funny you're talking about the bus, because when it's parked at his house in Texas, he'll just hang out on his bus. He won't go into. He will go into his house, but he likes to hang out on his bus. That's his home. You know, it's been that way for years and years and years. And sometimes he'll just sleep on it and, you know, not go into the house.
And you mind if I ask, like, so when he's on his bus, how long has he had a driver? Is it the same driver, or does he switch drivers?
He has the same two drivers that I've known forever, Tony and Gates, and they switch back and forth. And when the one's driving, the other one's sleeping.
So they're on the that's the rock star way to do it. So
they have their own bunk. They have their own bunk, you know, that they can sleep in. And I think they each have their own bunk, but I know that the bottom bunk is the driver's bunk. And I loved the bunks when I was a kid. All I wanted to do was play on each bunk. And I've always wanted my own tour bus just because he had one. Just like, your whole life is right there, you know, and you can go anywhere.
And then he had the back room as his bedroom. Is that the way?
Yeah. So the back bedroom is just a bed. You can't really walk back there. It's just his bed, and tons of dream catchers, and a big photo of a painting of an eagle, and all kinds of Native American, Indian, because that's our family lineage. All kinds of Native American garb in there, and I would just go.
And how long
sleep?
Has he had the same bus?
Oh man, I think we're on Honeysuckle Rose 5 or 6 now.
He puts a lot of miles on a bus, so he's wearing them out.
Yeah. It's.
I never heard of the two, because we would, you know, the driver's only allowed to drive a certain amount of time. I never heard of like, oh yeah, if you have 2 bus drivers, then you could just get to the places even quicker because you don't have to stop. You know,
No,
I never knew that existed.
He leaves right after his show. He doesn't stick around the town and goes right to the next one and spends the day at the next town or city, you know. And for a long time, he would get out and run, you know, just run around the city. And then as he's gotten older, he's biking more now. And he's not on the road right now because of COVID, and that's not starting until August. So we're talking about pre-COVID here. He'd just take his bike, and it would be on the side of the bus, you know, somehow chained up, and just go down the road, and he would take it off and just go riding his bike. Maybe you'll see Willie riding his bike sometime.
Yeah, he probably never got help. Who expects to see Willie Nelson
him.
riding a bicycle down the street? So I'm sure he went unaccosted doing that.
Yeah.
But we talked about it, the bus thing, because I was like, you know, it'd be great to have a driver, but your grandpa, they literally drive his house to wherever. He came to see us play one time in this tiny club in Nashville, and literally the tour bus pulled up, and he was within 15 steps, he's in the club. And I'm like, that's the way to roll. When you're done, you go right back to your house, not in the car to get to your house, back to your house.
I know, I'm with you. Doing that tour, when I did that tour with Daniel Tosh, we had 2 tour buses, and I got the beauty of it. Like 2 of these, they're aircraft carriers basically, and you get into a little city, and the way they can drive, and one bus just turns the corner, and then it pulls into the hotel, then the other bus comes right behind, and it's like the whole thing was exciting. Or when we would get police escorts just out of the off campus, just to get us through it. And it was like we're all full-grown adults, and we would go to the front of the bus just to watch them like stop traffic, and then the lights would go on, and they'd get us onto the highway. And then they would always get on their PA. Most of the time, they would get on the PA and go, "Hey, enjoy the tour." And then they would just get off the next exit. And we were like, that would give me the goosebumps every night. I was like, oh, this is just, I want to do this nonstop.
And it's like being inside the womb, too. It's like the safest place in the world. You just want to get back on there. If anything's crazy out, you get on there and you're like, safe.
Yeah. We had, because there was only 3 of us, we all had not only a bunk, they would take, because they can have like 3 high where you only have this much room.
Right.
They would take the dividers out. So we all had.
Yeah.
You had the condo is what they call them.
Yeah.
Right. At that point, that becomes a condo. And when I did a tour with, and then I'll shut up, but a while back, I did a tour with David Cross, and I had a bunk. And the next morning, they're like, "Todd, you get the back room." I'm like, "Why? The bedroom." He goes, "Because you snore and nobody can sleep." I'm like, "All right, well, I'll take the back room."
Perfect. I got to ask before, I know we're getting up against it, but you mentioned bringing a keyboard player on the road. Do you ever do any singing with them? Do you ever any kind of music joining up with the keyboard players, or were you ever in a band? Did you ever do any kind of musical stuff like that?
Write any songs?
No. You know what? I'm obsessed with music, and but I really can't. I mean, I can sing a little, but not enough. You know what? This will explain it. I can sing if there's a 3-piece or whatever backing me. Somebody once asked, it was in a city where we had my keyboard, the guy who played for me a lot was there. And then the keyboard player or the guitar player goes, "Hey, what key does Todd sing in?" And I heard him laugh because he doesn't sing in any key. We just sort of follow him. And then the trumpet comes in if you need it. So I can croon with the band that knew me real well. But mostly it's just for the, after I tell a joke, the band fires off, or the rim shots occasionally. And mostly it's just the intro. I love intros. I love to make the opening of a show as big as I can make it. The way the band takes the stage, if they're not playing as people are being seated. I get the comedy club, the lights go down, we blink them. Let people know there's a show starting. Then the band shoots out one at a time. I always tell them, when the drummer goes out, wait 25 seconds before the next go out. Get comfortable, hit your drum, make it exciting, And so mostly the band's for that. But no, never sang or anything.
It kind of you're creating a TV show production kind of when you're doing your shows.
Like building anticipation before it ever starts. It's like a rock concert because it's the same thing. Everybody's kind of mumbling. You can hear the crowd talking. And then as soon as the lights go down, everybody's like, "Oh, here we go."
Yes.
Here we go.
It's exciting. I want to give people the chills before the show starts. How do I know? Because I went to shows, and when they were doing stuff like that, it was exciting. And so yeah, I always try to get someone said Walt Disney got it the best. Think of before the ride, what you walk through. To me, it starts from where they're buying their tickets. Most clubs, if you ask nicely, and I have an expression, you can't be more of a pain in the ass than you are a draw. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't have to be nice and polite, but if you're selling some tickets, they don't mind if you ask for a few things. And a lot of times it would be some a little silly, and I'd almost feel embarrassed because the showroom, they sort of get, oh, he wants the lights like that. He wants the music. I always gel everything blue if I can. I want people to walk into a sea of blue with cool music playing that they did not hear in the car. Doesn't mean I don't like it. I heard it today. Cool, eclectic music that they have not heard in the car. The room's blue. The music's different, even when they're buying their tickets. So in the room they get, but a few clubs where they buy the ticket, it's so bright. And I would ask the manager on the second night, hey, can we? So all of a sudden he's like, oh, yeah, no problem. Sometimes they're real cool about it. This is the way they do it. he'd shut a light out, or we put black tin foil around a light that they couldn't turn off and then we lit a candle. So now people come in the front door where they're buying their ticket is sexy. It starts right there, you know? And I always tell the clubs, even when the show's over, I'll do my time. I'll do short. I won't go over absurd. So you have to put fuck you lights on. People, forget about the people that spend hard-earned money. Some people spend money they shouldn't be spending. I don't want fuck you lights. You know, when the show's over, they'll come up so they can leave safely. And then the house lights don't come on until every single customer is out. You know, every single customer is out. Then we turn them on.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating to see how comedians, all you guys come at it in completely different. You're the first we've talked to that's mentioned setting up some sort of total experience as opposed to like
you really care about that
and thinking about the crowd. Now, all of them talk about people coming and spending their hard-earned money, and you don't want to dog it. But a lot of them are like, well, I do this, I'm going to tell my jokes or do my bit, and we just hadn't heard anybody talking about the ambiance and setting all that up. It's very cool. It's a cool way of thinking about it.
A lot of people don't know that they can. I became friends with a musician about 2 years ago. His name is Andy Frasco. And from him coming to see me, how I set up the show, he didn't even know. And I'm glad, because he taught me things and I taught him things. He didn't know that, like, you know how they open the doors up, especially in music, sometimes an hour before the show, you know, like,
yeah.
And he didn't know that he could ask them, hey, can you lower the lights in here? He never did that. Now he says he does. Like, even the lighting that they're going to be waiting an hour in a room, bring it down. I go, you should have a playlist. You shouldn't rely on the clubs. Sometimes you get a club that they play a cool playlist. I go, Andy, you got to make an hour or two worth of music that you play, even as they're just coming into this room. You know, you got to make it fucking special right from the beginning. And he does now. He'll go to the place where he's working. Hey, can we bring these lights down in the lobby? Just even in the lobby. And I love that he does that now.
Yeah, that's super cool.
It's genius. All right, Todd, it's been an hour. Thank you so much for doing this with us. You're awesome.
Great.
This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate it. And I hope I wasn't boring.
No, not at all.
Never boring. Never boring.
Never. You were the furthest thing from boring.
Yeah, and if you ever happen to get to Nashville again, look us up.
Oh, and you know what? You should come. I know you said you don't like to sing, but you should come sing a song with us, because we're going to play in LA at Hotel Cafe in just a few weeks, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
July 18th. You want to come sing a song?
Yeah, first of all, if you have my number, because sometimes texting easier. If you just text me like a week, if you remember. If you don't, I'm not putting pressure on you. But before the pandemic, I started to go see live music more around LA, like, you know, and not just at like 3,000 seat rooms, you know, like cool little, and I was loving it. And I'm ready to do it again. It was a great experience. And so I would love to not sing, but just come check you out. Would be
fantastic.
Great.
Okay. Well, I'll send you a text and let you know when that happens. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thanks again, man. Nice to meet you,
guys.
Dude.
Good talk. Bye.
Hey, Todd Glass is my favorite comedian. He's such a happy guy.
Talking to the Todd Glass.
Wow.
Enjoy your groceries.
Free Britney.
I know your mama's name.
Don't be an asshole.